Jean-Philippe Rameau. He was known for music with bold melodic lines and harmony. His greatest contribution to music was tragedy lyric opera. Johann Pachelbel. His work Canon in D Major is his famous work and you can hear it to this day in countless weddings. His influence on Baroque music led to the success of many other composers. Giovanni Battista Sammartini. He specialized in oboe and organ, and he is one of the earliest composers of a symphony. Classical music. Classical music is an art music rooted in the tradition of Western music. It includes both liturgical and secular music. During the classical period, different forms of music like instrumental forms, sonata, concerto, and symphony were developed. Composers composed music objectively, followed a form, one of which was the sonata allegro form found at the beginning of each instrumental composition. These are the most famous composers in classical period. Ludwig van Beethoven. He was a German composer and pianist. He was a crucial figure in the transition between the classical and romantic eras in Western art music. His best-known compositions include 9 symphonies, 5 piano concertos, 1 violin concerto, 32 piano sonatas, 16-string quartet, his great mass The Missa Solemnis, and 1 opera Fidelio. Joseph Haydn. He was an Austrian composer. He was instrumental in the development of chamber music such as piano trio, and his contributions to musical form have earned him the epithet Father of the Symphony and the Father of the String Quartet. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He showed prodigious ability from his earliest childhood. Already competent on keyboard and violin, he composed from the age of 5 and performed before European royalty. He composed more than 600 works, many acknowledged as pinnacles of symphonic, chamber, operatic, and choral music. Franz Schubert. He was an Austrian composer who composed over 600 secular vocal works, 7 complete symphonies, sacred music, operas, incidental music, and a large body of chamber and piano music.
Romantic music is a period of Western classical music that started late in the 18th or early 19th century. Romantic music dominated the Romantic movement in Germany. Musicians had the chance to express themselves freely. Music became an international language because it was easily understood and expressed. Romantic music was characterized by interest in stories, folklore, mythology, and supernatural stories. Moods were experienced according to the temperament, primarily, and personal convictions of the composer. Among the most famous composers of this period are the following: Carl Maria Friedrich Ernst von Weber. He was a German composer, conductor, pianist, guitarist, and critic. Many of his operas greatly influenced the development of the Romantic opera in Germany. He had a lifelong interest in the music of non-Western cultures, which he manifested in his incidental music for Schiller's translation of Gozzi's Turandot, for which he used a Chinese melody, making him the first Western composer to use an Asian tune that was not of the pseudo-Turkish kind popularized by Mozart and others. Weber's composition for clarinet, bassoon, and horn also occupy an important place in the musical repertoire. His contribution to the vocal and choral music is also significant, as he was also notable as one of the first conductors to conduct without a piano or violin. Frédéric Francois Chopin. He was a Polish composer and a virtuoso pianist of the Romantic era who wrote primarily for the solo piano. All of his compositions include a piano. Most are for solo piano, though he also wrote 2 piano concertos, a few chamber pieces, and some songs to Polish lyrics. His keyboard style is highly individual and often technically demanding. His own performances were noted for their nuance and sensitivity. His innovations in style, musical form, and harmony, and his association of music with nationalism were influential throughout and after the late Romantic period. Robert Schumann. He was a German composer and influential music critic. His published compositions were written exclusively for the piano until 1840. He later composed works for piano and orchestra, many lieder, songs for voice, and piano, 4 symphonies, an opera, and other orchestral, choral, and chamber work.
Franz Liszt, prolific Hungarian composer and a virtuoso pianist, composed Hungarian rhapsodies. A rhapsody is an instrumental composition that has no exact form. It makes use of themes that are lifted from folk music. It has 2 parts, Lausanne or slow dance, and Fusca, the fast dance. One example of a rhapsody that Liszt composed is the Hungarian Rhapsody No. 15. Wilhelm Richard Wagner, German composer, theater director, polemicist, and conductor, primarily known for his opera, wrote libretto and the music for each of his stage works. His compositions, complex textures, rich harmonies and orchestration, and elaborate use of leitmotifs, which are musical phrases associated with individual characters, places, ideas, or plot elements. His extreme chromaticism and quickly shifting tonal centers greatly influenced the development of classical music. Modern music, 20th and 21st centuries emergence of new technology. Modern composers were forced to consider experimental ways in framing their musical ideas. Some of the trends introduced are electronic music, jazz music, and minimalist music. Among the most famous composers of this period are the following: Claude Debussy, French composer, most prominent features associated with impressionistic music, though he disliked the term when applied to his compositions. Among most influential composers of the late 19th and 20th centuries, the uses of non-traditional scales and chromaticism influenced many composers who followed. His music, sensory content, and frequent use of non-traditional tonalities. Igor Stravinsky, Russian composer, composed music for ballet. Used changing meter in his composition. This composition is known as multimeter or mixed meters that varies its meter frequently to change accents and alter tempo.
Arnold Franz Walter Schönberg, Austrian composer, music theorist, and painter, known for simultaneously extending the traditionally opposed German Romantic style of Brahms and Wagner. In the 1920s, developed the 12-tone technique, an influential compositional method of manipulating an ordered series of all 12 notes in the chromatic scale. Joseph Maurice Ravel, French composer, pianist, and conductor. He belonged to the Impressionism movement. His style, great clarity, incorporating elements of Baroque, Neoclassicism in his later works in jazz. Among his works to enter the repertoire are pieces for piano, chamber music, 2 piano concertos, ballet music, 2 operas, and 8 song cycles. First composers to recognize the potential of recording to bring their musics to a wider public. Aaron Copland, American composer, is known as the Dean of American composers. He is best known for the works he wrote in 1930s and 1940s, which is populist, in which the composers levied his vernacular style. His ballet and orchestral works, he produced musics like chamber music, vocal works, opera, and film scores. He used the tone rows in much the same fashion as his tonal material as sources for melodies and harmonies, rather than as complete statements in their own right, except for crucial events from a structural point of view. To summarize it all up, music as we know it today is the breaking down of all traditional aesthetic conventions, thereby unleashing complete freedom in all aesthetic dimensions that include melody, rhythm, and chord progressions. Audio recording technology was centered to the revolution of modern music. Non-Western music was suddenly open to exploration, thus exposing Western composers to countless exotic musical ideas.